This is about the 7-point plot outline. I've done it in a number of other workshops. So for this workshop, since I did it really well in one of the past ones, and I probably couldn't repeat it again here as well as I did on that one, I'm just going to use that one. So this is the introduction to that. Watch the 7-point. It's really, really critical as a basics here. Okay, a long time ago in a land far away, a wild and crazy and somewhat scammy agent by the name of Scott Meredith started a literary agency. Now this is back in the 40s, and I'm not even sure when Scott Meredith agency started, but it was a long time back. And what he did is he not only did he have his Scott Meredith agency itself, but he decided to open up a reading fee side of his agency. So you could send a manuscript, and for I think it was like $500 or $400, which was a lot of money back in the 50s, and get your manuscript read by someone at the Scott Meredith agency. And so what Scott did is to help these people in this back sweatshop, you know, of turning these manuscripts around. There was no hope. I think there was only one in 40 years of doing that sweatshop that ever made it from the back room to becoming an agent. I mean, being actually agented and sold. This was a scam operation to, you know, give feedback on writers and maybe try to help them on their next books. I don't know. But it ended up, it had some major writers working in that back room when they were young. People like Lawrence Block, for example, and numbers of others. You'd recognize their name. A lot of people went through that back room at that Scott Meredith agency, basically just grinding through manuscripts. And it taught a lot of these people who were doing this grinding a lot about how to write story. Well, Scott basically came up with what was called his 9-point plot, because he wanted all the letters going back to these authors to have the same basic 9 things in them on how to tell a story. And so he broke story down into 9 elements. And this lasted for a long time, and all of these writers in the back room just got used to looking at this and applying the 9 elements when they were writing these letters back to the people who'd paid the $400 or $500 for this reading fee. And it was a goldmine for a long time. Barry Malzberg, for heaven's sakes, I think worked back there for 25 or 30 years. I mean, a long time. He's one of the best writers functioning, both in short fiction and in novels from the 70s on, and both in mystery and science fiction. So, you know, you got really good at, those guys back in that back room got really good at analyzing. And Algis Budrus, who started writing in the 50s, wrote some of the classics in science fiction, basically converted the 9-point Scott Meredith outline to the 7-point plot outline when he started teaching at Clarion. And then he went on to, of course, found the Writers of the Future, and was the judge at Writers of the Future and the editor of that anthology for a very long time. And he taught a lot of workshops and a lot of other stuff, and he taught this 7-point plot outline. And it's boiled down, basically easier than the 9-point, but it's exactly the same thing, and that's the history of it. And it is basically stood the test of time. AJ was teaching it back and doing columns about it and everything else back in the 60s and 70s, and it really hasn't changed. It is a way of looking at Western fiction and seeing what Western fiction, and you can analyze almost any story and you can see these elements. So let me give you the 7-point plot outline, because when you take an idea and turn it into a story, this is going to be the basis of what you're going to do. And this is the way we're going to work on this quite a bit. So even if you've heard this before, or you think you understand it, for heaven's sake, keep listening and pay attention this week. Because every time you hear this, I mean, I must have heard this 50 times before I started really completely understanding everything that was the nuances of this very simple little outline. All right, so back in school, your instructors, your English teacher used to say, well, a story has an opening, a middle, and an end. And a lot of good that did anybody. I mean, that was just worthless amount of information. Okay, so what's in an opening? Well, the first 3 points of the 7-point plot outline. You must have a character. That's number 1. Number 2, the character must be in a setting. And number 3, the character must have a problem. That's called the opening. Character in a setting with a problem. 1, 2, 3. Alrighty. that problem doesn't have to be the main problem of the story. It could be the character has a freaking hangnail and can't walk straight. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's just a problem that they're trying to figure out. So that's the opening. Now you get into the middle of the story. Now often the opening is one paragraph, sometimes two, depending on the length of it. Novels sometimes, but that's exactly what it is. And you'll see this in every movie and everything else you do. There's a character in a setting with a problem. Okay, number 4. The character tries to solve the problem. Okay, makes a legitimate attempt to solve the problem. A legitimate attempt. Number 5, the character must fail. And by failing, making things worse. Must make things worse. If you want to see the prime example of this, watch the first opening of Skyfall, the new James Bond movie, before the credits. I mean, they go through about 15 try-fail sequences where he tries and fails and tries and fails and tries and fails and tries and fails. And every time he does, things get worse. And that's the nature of this. Okay. If you have enough try-fail cycles, you have a novel. If you only do a couple try-fail cycles, you usually have a short story. And we'll talk about that difference later. But number 1 is character. Number 2, in a setting. Number 3, character must have a problem. The character must try to solve the problem. And number 5, the character must fail. Or if the character succeeds, things get worse. Things always must get worse. Just remember that. Or you're watching any movie or anything else, things get worse, and it'll get worse, and that's the thing. This is where most beginning writers really, really, really mess up. They like their characters. So, character has a problem, they solve it. End of story. No. Not the way Western fiction works, folks. The character has to fail. You gotta just beat all over your characters. And if you don't like that, for heaven's sakes, go find another job, another profession, because that's the nature of Western fiction. Your character must fail. Okay? Number 6 on this 7-point plot outline is what the English professors and stuff calls the climax. This is basically where all the tri-fails have been going on. You just have tri-fail. It's called tri-fail cycles. So you go 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, all the way through. Your villains have tri-succeed cycles. They keep going and making things work for the hero. And you go all the way down until everything is on the line for the hero, the main protagonist of the story. Everything's on the line. The final tri-sequence. This is called the climax. Everything's on the line, the world's about to end, whatever. The marriage is about to break up, the man she's in love with is about to leave, depending on if it's a romance, all of that sort of stuff. The final try. Okay, now if that try succeeds, then you have, in classic literary terms, a comedy. If that try fails, then that final try, then you have a tragedy. And that's how you get those two literary terms. But by and large in most fiction, for example, in romance, the character has the final try and the characters succeed and live happily ever after. So that's number 6. That's the big climax scene. Number 7, you got to tell the reader somehow the story's done. How many times have all of us got to the end of a book, turned the page, expecting to have more, and there was nothing more? The writer forgot the validation. The number 7. You have to validate that the story is over. You have to say, okay, you can put the book now. Everything's good. They got married and lived happily ever after. The crime is resolved. In whatever genre you're working in. The good guys beat the bad guys, If you want the prime example, the most cliched example of this, let's go back to the very first made Star Wars movie. The big award ceremony at the end. And, they do this at all the movies. It makes them feel better. At the end of the new James Bond movie, they had the whole sequence where, "You ready for duty, Mr. Bond?" Yes. He's talking to the new M. And so, you just, all of that that's the validation scene. Yes, the movie's over. It's okay now. You can go home. You can leave the theater. You can put down the book. And you feel good about it. One quick point on that most of you might not realize: you sell the book the reader is reading with the opening and your cover and your blurbs. and all that. That's what you sell that book. You sell your next book by your ending. If your ending feels good and has good validation and everything to it, they're going to want to pick up another story from you, and that's how you sell your next book. So your ending sells the next book, your opening sells the book that they're reading. That's the key. So that's the 7-point plot outline. I have it written below this video. All right, one more time through the 7-point plot outline. You have a character in a setting with a problem. That's called an opening. Then the character tries to solve the problem. The character must fail. You can repeat that as much as you want. Character makes one final try. That's the climax, and then you have a validation.